Hey everybody, Collin here. This video is going to be recapping week 7 of your college football picks that we went through. We talked about Rutgers, Nebraska, Texas A&M, Michigan State, Miami, and Liberty. So without further ado, let's get started. The first pick that we're going to recap is going to be Rutgers minus 2.5. That was the first loss of the week. Rutgers looked pretty sluggish against Northwestern. They looked pretty hungover from their previous games against Michigan State, Ohio State, and Michigan. It looked like they had been underprepared for this match compared to previous tougher games. So I think a lot of this was poor play calling and undisciplined play. I mean, 11 penalties, including an unsportsmanlike, that led to a really bad swap of field. And ultimately, Northwestern's defense, while much maligned this year, ended up being the difference maker. They only allowed 222 yards, which is actually 300 yards less than the average that Northwestern allows per game. So what's next? Rutgers gets a week off and then goes to redeem themselves versus Illinois, and Northwestern gets Michigan at the Big House. That being said, I'm probably going to fade both of these teams for the rest of the year. They just show they don't have the consistency or the ability to keep up with their schedule. The next one that we had was Nebraska, which was -4. That one also lost because they lost straight up to Minnesota. So they couldn't capitalize on favorable positioning in the second half. Twice in the third quarter, they started in really good positioning. One led to a turnover on downs on the goal line, couldn't punch it in, and then in the fourth quarter, they missed a field goal after starting at the end of the third with good field. Minnesota's first half was near perfect, and with the P.J. Fleck-led team, if you're going 3 for 4 with scoring, he's going to keep you in it, and that team is going to stay in it if you let them stay in it, and he's been like that ever since he was even at Western. So Nebraska is kind of like the Detroit Lions of the NCAA. They hurt themselves throughout the game, but rarely ever are they out of the game completely. As a matter of fact, their worst loss this season was by 8 points to Illinois of all teams. I'm going to be leery of large spreads these coming weeks, even though they're playing tough teams in the following weeks of Ohio State and Iowa. I think that they'll still keep it within 10 points on those teams. They just have a chance of sticking around as well. But Nebraska has a bye this week, and then they go to Purdue, who took down Iowa this week. And then Minnesota has Maryland this week. So our first win of the week came with Texas A&M at -8.5 over Missouri. They took advantage of the nation's worst run defense, 283 yards rushing with 3 touchdowns. That's just unbelievable. A&M's defense kept Missouri scoring on 2 key drives in the first quarter, building that momentum for a 21-0 lead. So, in my opinion, Missouri is going to be one of my favorite teams to bet against this year, especially for first quarter spreads. They haven't beaten a Power 5 team, and their coaching is subpar at best. And they're actually outscored 63-10 this year in the first quarter. So going forward with their schedule, I think that they're going to be an absolute lock in the first quarter. I don't think they can figure it out. They just don't show up to play. A&M has South Carolina this next week, who nearly lost to Vanderbilt, and then Missouri has a week off, and then they had the resurgent Vanderbilt after that. So we'll see how they play against Texas A&M, and then maybe they might be a straight-up moneyline pick against Missouri, depending on how they look against a strong Texas A&M team. The next win that we got was Michigan State -4.5. It wasn't pretty, but Michigan State won and covered. They're now 5-2 against the spread this year, and Indiana is 1-5 against the spread. MSU looked pretty tired from their schedule, I'll be honest with you. They looked uninspired. They really couldn't get any momentum without using trick plays, as you might have seen from a tight end passing to the quarterback with a pretty athletic catch along the sideline. But the quarterback had 2 interceptions after coming into the game with 2 all year. So Michigan State's defense was really the only reason that they stayed in this game. 2 interceptions on defense, one of which was for a touchdown, which kept them in the game for a while after they looked to be pretty much dead on the offensive side of the ball. And then also 8 pass breakups and only allowing 322 yards, which is 100 less than their season average. Now, Indiana has some impressive losses now. That all 4 of their losses are against teams that were ranked in the top 10 this past week. But they are 0-4 against ranked teams against the spread. So next week they'll be playing Ohio State at home. I think you could probably fade them. Might be seeing them on the next video for this upcoming week. Don't know what the spread is yet, but it should be released soon. And then Michigan State gets a week off, and they play Michigan at home for the Paul Bunyan Trophy. All right, last 2 were our gut calls or our Hail Mary calls. Liberty -32, that was a big loss. Okay, that one's on me. They got all they could handle in this game. They suffered a major upset. At closing, ULM was a positive 3,000 money line. So they just got absolutely just beat in this game. It's interesting that some games aren't played on paper, and ULM bucked all of their trends. 12 points more than their average, 13 points less than their average points allowed, 130 less yards per game allowed on defense, and more than 100 yards per game on average on offense is what they gained this game. So what's next is Liberty faces North Texas for redemption, and I'll tell you, North Texas looked like crap this week. So this might be a good game for Liberty to bounce back. ULM hosts Southern Alabama, and the line's probably going to be skewed after this win, after overcoming a 32-point underdog status to win outright. So there might be some value inside of the Southern Alabama line. Now, last one is Miami plus 7.5. That was a win, and almost a straight up money line win too. If you would have faded, or if you would have sprinkled some on that. Sometimes the gut calls are the best calls, folks. I didn't have a lot of stats to prove that this was going to be a good one. I just had a lot of faith in the quarterback there, but they were one final play away from winning outright. It was a double tip ball at the line of scrimmage, and the defense ended up intercepting it for UNC. Although Miami did suffer an additional loss, they lost Cameron Harris, which is their top scorer and top rusher, to injury. I don't know what that's going to look like in the long run, but it's probably not going to be favorable for the team. So keep that in mind if you're going to be looking at Miami in future games. And then Miami, this next game gets a tough NC State at home. I mean, they beat the spread this week. They're looking tough. I think they're number 2 right now in the ACC. So UNC has a week off, and then they go to South Bend to play Notre Dame, which happens to be one of the teams that I will never bet for or against. So you won't see that in any future videos. But that being said, this week we finished 3-3, which I think is a good start for the OddsJam tenure for me. And I look forward next week to do more of a winning average. You'll see my video coming up soon with this week's picks and why I think that they're the best. Leave any comments that you might have for me if you think I'm great, if you think I suck. But that being said, on to next week.